afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I am your host, Candice Pope, and welcome to the Voices of Diversity discussion, where we will be discussing inclusive education and its challenges. In accordance with UNICEF's article entitled Conventions on the Rights of the Child, Article 28 and 29 states respectively that every child should have a right to education, and children's education should help them fully develop their personalities, talents, and abilities. When Trinidad and Tobago created their inclusion education policy, it mirrored that of UNICEF and even delves in deeper as it states that every child has the ability to learn and that schools should provide for all students programs which are adapting to varying disabilities. Even though Trinidad is striving to achieve this inclusion, there are some challenges with implementing this system. At a local school, Sweet Valley High, a major challenge is having students with learning disabilities in the classroom when schools do not have the necessary resources and support services to accommodate them. These students have difficulty acquiring basic skills or academic content due to difficulty using or understanding spoken or written language. We are extremely fortunate to have a distinguished panel of stakeholders from Sweet Valley High with us today to discuss the issue. Allow me to introduce Ms. Eliza Takadine, School Administrator, Mrs. Akila McPherson, School Teacher, and Mrs. Annalisa Chedi, Guidance Officer. Today, we will be having a discussion on policy and practices that will promote inclusive education in Sweet Valley High. According to the school website, their policy states that all students should be given the adequate teaching and support needed to benefit fully from the education system and achieve their maximum potential, not only academically, but holistically. When I think of inclusive education, I think of equal opportunities for all. As the principal of Sweet Valley High, what does inclusive education mean for you?
As a school administrator, inclusive education is an approach to education that aims to create equal learning opportunities for all students, regardless of their abilities. It is a school culture that values all students as learners and ensures that they have equal access to education. A philosophy approach can help school inclusivity by establishing a core set of values and actively embrace diversity, recognize individual needs, and promote equitable access to learning for all students.
What about you, Miss McPherson and Mrs. Chedi? What are your thoughts?
Inclusive education means being able to create an educational environment where every child, regardless of their ability, disability, or circumstances, has access to the same opportunities to learn, grow, and thrive. Established in philosophy, it means being able to adapt my teaching methods, strategies, materials to meet the unique needs of children with learning disabilities, cultural backgrounds, or socioeconomic status.
Based on the interpretive approach of sociology, I believe that the school as a social institution influences the way students think, behave, and thrive. So in my view, inclusive education is about recognizing and appreciating diversity and creating an environment where all students feel welcomed, supportive, and can thrive.
Such interesting responses. I noticed that everyone's response made mention of the school's environment. So do you think it is important to promote inclusive education policies and practices in your school? Let's hear from you, Mrs. Takadine.
At our school, it is very important to promote inclusive education since it benefits all students at Sweet Valley High, not only students with learning issues. We need to make the school culture one of acceptance, to be welcoming and kind to each other, regardless of students' differences, be it physical, speech, intelligence, or a learning disorder. A culture of belonging for all students should be promoted at our school, since this is a motivating factor to encourage acceptance of all students.
In keeping with your responses of the importance of practicing inclusive education and the international perspective where the Conventions on the Rights of the Child, UN 1989, make specific reference to the rights of children with disabilities and the obligations of member states to provide for their care, education, and training, do you think your school practices inclusive education?
While Trinidad and Tobago has an inclusive education policy stating a commitment to inclusive education, there are significant concerns regarding its full implementation at Sweet Valley High, with challenges like insufficient teacher training, inadequate facilities, and limited resources potentially hinders the practice of a truly inclusive environment. While we have taken steps towards inclusive education through policy, there is still room for improvement to fully achieve inclusive practices at my school.
Inclusive education is somewhat practiced in Sweet Valley High. However, there are several challenges in which hinder providing an inclusive education effectively within my school context. For example, the lack of teacher training and professional development and the rigid curricula and assessment system in our school makes it difficult to practice inclusivity among our students with learning disabilities who are severely disadvantaged and struggles with the traditional assessments.
With regards to the role of the guidance officer and other student support services, I believe that inclusive education is practiced to some extent in Sweet Valley High. While I am available for consultation with students who may have learning disabilities, promoting inclusivity is difficult because there is not sufficient time available to schedule meetings with students who have issues. Very little information is shared with the school population concerning learning disabilities, and there are no counseling sessions with parents available.
Seeing that there is still some work to do at Sweet Valley High regarding inclusivity, what practices will you implement in your school to promote inclusive education among students with learning disabilities in the capacity of your role as school administrator, teacher, and guidance officer?
Here are some approaches that we at Sweet Valley High can use to improve our inclusivity in our school environment. Philosophy is at the heart of curriculum development. The philosopher John Dewey spoke about tailoring the school curriculum to focus on subjects the student enjoys the most. It is my desire to create this type of atmosphere where students can meet their full potential. As such, in my capacity as school principal, I can make amendments to the school curriculum to include more practical subjects. For example, Sweet Valley High School's focus is on traditional core subjects, which include maths and English. The practical subjects that are offered, like physical education and agricultural science, receive the least number of classes per week on the timetable. This may have worked years ago, but today, where we have children who are being diagnosed with a range of learning disabilities and who learn differently, we need to change the curriculum so that everyone can benefit. Teaching the practical subjects alongside the traditional core subjects will cater to all students, even the one with learning disabilities, as it will help develop important skills that are essential to success. We also need to allocate more teaching time to those subjects on the timetable. Learning skills such as problem solving, critical thinking, time management, and teamwork through practical training can enhance students' overall development and make them more well-rounded individuals. Another strategy, we will also do continuous professional development and training for staff as necessary. Plato, a philosopher, believed that educators need rigorous training and development themselves to fulfill their roles effectively. Plato argued that only those with the right moral character and intellectual aptitude should educate others. He emphasized that training educators required both theoretical knowledge and practical application. In Sweet Valley High, teachers are not trained to deal with learning disabilities in the classroom. This lack of training leads to a feeling of unpreparedness, which in turn leads to teacher frustration. Thus, by implementing this practice, teachers will be able to stay up to date with the latest and best practices for their students. It will also allow teachers to connect and collaborate with each other in the teaching community. This in turn will boost teachers' confidence and open their creativity. Even though we can all agree that the development of skills is important, these workshops should also aim to change teachers' attitudes towards children with learning disability. Also, as a school administrator, I realize that inclusive education goes beyond the school's wall. In Sweet Valley High, there seems to be a disconnect between the parents, students, and the school. Parents seem to lack the knowledge and solution in dealing with their children and are rarely seen at the school. Therefore, this practice will encourage parents via regular workshops and PTA meetings to build a supportive network for their children, which will especially benefit the parents of children with learning disabilities. Parental involvement leads the way to a supportive home environment which is conducive to learning. John Locke, a philosopher, made significant contributions to educational theory, emphasizing the role of parental involvement in a child's upbringing and education. In his seminal work, Some Thoughts Concerning Education, Locke provided a comprehensive framework for raising and educating children. He believed the family environment plays a fundamental role in shaping a child's character and values early age. In addition, education is going beyond the school walls, with parents, the school community, and the corporate sector can also be targeted to support the educational needs of the student by donating resources to the school, such as adaptive equipment and assistive technology resources.
As an educator, providing an inclusive education to students with learning disabilities requires continuous adaptation to their needs. The following are some effective strategies and practices which should be implemented. Vygotsky's theory of differentiation recognized that learners have different abilities, interests, and prior knowledge. Implemented differentiated instructions, teachers can adapt their teaching strategies, materials, and assessment to meet the diverse needs of their students. I will be able to tailor my approach and instructions to meet the diverse needs of students with learning disabilities. Students with learning disabilities may process information at different rates or in different ways. Differentiated instructions can ensure each student is receiving appropriate support. This can be implemented by offering various assessments for students to express their understanding, such as oral presentation, written assessment, and visual projects. In addition, Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence, founded in the discipline psychology, emphasized that individuals possess different types of intelligence, which affect how they learn and process information. Gardner identified visual spatial intelligence, which highlights the value of visual aids for students with learning disabilities. Educators must recognize that students learn in different ways, and visual spatial intelligence is a critical pathway for some learners. As educators, we must tailor our teaching strategies to better meet the needs of our students, improving engagement and their understanding. Visual aids like charts, diagrams, and pictures, along with graphic organizers such as Venn diagrams, mind maps, and storyboards, can help students organize their thoughts. These tools provide structure and enhance information retention, and simplify complex topics by breaking them into smaller, more manageable parts. Furthermore, I will implement positive reinforcement and motivation. As an educator, providing positive reinforcement to students with learning disabilities involves recognizing and rewarding desired behavior to encourage repetition, no matter how small. Many students with learning disabilities struggle with motivation due to past experiences of failure. Positive reinforcement can increase their confidence and engagement. It can be implemented by offering praise for effort, not just for correct answers. Providing frequent and specific feedback that acknowledge improvement and the use of rewards such as stickers to celebrate achievement are examples of positive reinforcement. B.F. Skinner, psychologist and founder of radical behaviorism and the pioneer of occupant condition, proposed that all behavior is determined by the environmental factors and can be modified through reinforcement. He proposed strengthening behavior can be done by providing positive consequences or removing negative stimuli, which emphasize that behaviors followed by positive reinforcement are most likely to be repeated.
With regard to promoting inclusivity at Sweet Valley High, where there are a number of students with learning disabilities, I believe that guidance officers specifically should provide additional support to these students where needed. Some practices I hope to implement coming out of these policies would be to introduce counseling sessions with parents and students diagnosed with learning disabilities. According to sociologist Joyce Epstein, students with parental involvement perform better in their academic endeavors. These meetings with parents would ensure that they are aware of their children's disability, understand its limitations, and are equipped to handle any challenges that may arise because of the disability. With the support of their parents, students with learning disabilities should perform better academically because they feel acknowledged and supported. Secondly, as guidance officer, I would host awareness campaigns for the entire school population to highlight different learning disabilities and how we can overcome the challenges associated with them. The labeling theory is a theory founded by sociologist Howard S. Becker that explains how people's identities and behaviors are shaped by the labels others give them. I believe that by providing the school population with adequate knowledge on various learning disabilities, it will foster a culture of acceptance, understanding, and inclusion. This will boost students' self-esteem, which will make them feel good about themselves. It will also help reduce stigmatization, as all students will feel more connected to the school community. They would feel understood and valued, which can then fuel their interest in academics and even school activities. Lastly, symbolic interactionism, a theory founded by American sociologist George Herbert Mead, emphasizes the importance of social interactions in shaping a person's understanding of the world. For example, students' interactions with peers can impact their motivation, learning, and academic understanding. By establishing peer support groups, students with learning disabilities can be around other students who will help them in their holistic school life. This impact is that it may help students with learning disabilities learn how to work with others and how to persevere through challenges when they see those behaviors being demonstrated by their peers.
What challenges do you predict you may face when implementing this policy and practices in your school?
As the principal, some of the challenges faced will include lack of funding at my school for resources and unwillingness by students to change their behavior of acceptance for different types of learners.
A challenge I predict is resistance to change by some teachers because they may be unwilling to change their teaching strategies and methods.
I predict that there may be challenges in working with parents of students with learning disabilities. Some parents may be unwilling to get counseling with their children or may be willing but have time constraints.
So you heard it from the professionals themselves. Recommendations on what needs to be implemented move towards inclusive education in schools to assist all students, especially those with learning disabilities. This concludes our discussion today, everyone. It was a healthy and rich discussion on promoting inclusive education in the classroom for students with learning disabilities. I am your host, Candice Pope, and I would like to thank all stakeholders as well as viewers for joining us today. Do have a great evening, everyone.